And it's showtime, and we're live again. Yay! Woo! We
All
always
right.
have we have the most fantastic conversations before we go live, and I'm like, oh, hang on, we're going live. Let's stop it a minute because we go a million miles an hour. So today the topic is the history of trademarks and why we have them. And this is a really, really splendid topic, if you ask me. And thank you so much for coming up with it. You know, I've found a really, really interesting thing on the net that I will refer back to, but I'll just let you introduce yourself. Dave is my very, very excellent business bestie. That's how I like to refer to him.
Oh,
I've got two of these, and Dave is one of them. Is it David or Dave? I always get confused.
you don't have to be. You can call me what you like. I answer to anything. But my mum is probably about the only person that calls me David.
Right. Okay.
Or
So
my dad
David
goes when I'm in
is.
trouble.
I don't want to call you something that reminds you of trouble. So
Listen,
Dave is
I've
one of
been
my
called worse. And I'd be like,
very best business besties, and we are cooking up something really, really magnificent. But that's not for us to talk about today. Dave is the go-to guy if you want to learn anything, and I mean anything, about the emerging tax, or you need an energy audit. Was it a water audit you spoke about today?
Yeah, I wear a couple of hats. So basically, myself and two business partners, we've got a company called MXRB Consultants LLP, and we are setting up a training program where we can educate people that either know nothing or very little about emerging technology. So that would encompass, topically, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFTs, Web3, metaverse, and I've probably missed one out. So if you roll all that into one, which is kind of where the world is going, I think, in terms of digital, that's what we're sort of specialised in. We've got a few years' experience between us, and so on. As an aside, myself personally, I'm helping a business out where they help small, medium enterprises, just in the UK, unfortunately, but still better than nothing, where we can help them save their cost on all utilities, which includes water. And we do audits for water as well, so we can get cash back that way if it applies. We also look at all the telecoms, including mobile, and this captures voice over internet protocol, VoIPs. We can do that. And we also do general insurance. So if people are looking at bits and pieces like that, we can help. And the irony is, and kind of why I've concentrated on water at the moment, is a lot of swimming pools, I heard on the news, I think it was the tail end of last week, are really in trouble with trying to reduce their operating costs. Well, they need to come and speak with me. I can help them.
Okay. What I personally would really be interested in with regard to swimming pools is that if they stopped using all the chemicals and started using salt water instead, because I do not like the idea of submerging myself in chemicals. It's not that appealing to me, So that's why I don't really like swimming pools that much. They look beautiful and they look inviting, but when you think of all the chemicals that go in there, I'm like, yeah, not really. Thank you.
No, we're both asthmatics, so although it doesn't cause asthma symptoms as such, I used to live very, very close to a swimming pool, and I used to do 2 kilometers every single day. I love swimming. I'd come out all fit as anything and everything else, but I stank of chlorine. It's a horrid, horrid smell.
Yeah,
but
I can't stand it.
Because of the way that they work, they can't seem to think of a workaround around it. It's not like you can electrolysize the water, or maybe you can. If anyone's listening, let me know. I'd love to talk. But it is an off-putting thing, and I used to go through a bottle of shower gel every week because I was using so much to get myself clean. But when I got home, it started to affect my nose, and I had to give it up. I don't live near salt water, or I didn't at the time. course, in this country, it can get very cold, can't it? You know, in the winter. So swimming in salt water is not very appealing at all. But yes, there must be a solution out there, but where, I don't know. Perhaps some company could come
We'll
up.
find it. You know, somebody will think of something. I mean, when I in 2016 I went on a cruise, and there was this little elderly lady somewhere in America, or from America, who specialized in saltwater pools. So that's why I know they exist, but they just haven't made it over here yet.
Oh, there are saltwater pools, but you know, especially when you go away. Joking aside, not the sea, but I was in Greece, I think. Oh, I'm going back 40 years. They didn't have chlorine. They all had saltwater pools. But then again, salt can give people an issue. You know, there's no hard, fast, clear way. I mean, ideally, pure water from the river in the middle of Sweden, for instance, would be perfect, because it's surrounded by stuff. It's got loads of it inside, all those beautiful trees. I remember when I was last over there, it'd be great. Unfortunately, even worse than the UK, because it's further north, not quite so warm and readily available, but certainly during summer, I think it's a pretty spectacular place to visit.
Definitely. All right, shall we get back to our topic in hand?
Indeed.
So this website that I referred to earlier is called Respect for Trademarks, and in there's history of trademarks. And so the trademark, what do you think, what in your opinion does a trademark really do for a business? Why do we even have them? Why don't we just all trade under the same name? Like, for instance, because you have a namesake, there's a company called McCall somewhere. Why don't we just all trade under McCall? How would that work? What do you think that would do to the world of trade if we all traded under the same name?
God, be carnage. You know, you wouldn't have an identity. You wouldn't really know who you're dealing with. You know, I absolutely understand the why. It is as clear as the nose on people's faces. How it goes together, I don't, but I don't need to, because I can talk to you. And I just understand, and I have done for years, about risk. Everything is risk. Everything's got an element of risk attached to it. So if I was foolish enough to open up a retailer and call it by my namesake, by my surname, I'd be in serious trouble because of the big guys. You know, even in the last, I suppose 30 years or so, when I used to be involved in manufacturing, and you know, I worked for Swarovski and I worked for battery manufacturers in the past. They were obviously very keen about protecting their name, but what they also did, they had a manufacturing route in China. And back then, it was a really, we've got to be so careful what we let them know, because they'll just go ahead and copy it. Now, I've been to Southeast Asia many times, and I've seen the knockoff football shirts from Inter Milan, AC Milan, Manchester United, Man City, Liverpool. All the big football clubs globally have got a presence out there. And these people that are copying them are doing their product an injustice. You know, there's even T-shirts with McDonald's on there, the logo, that McDonald's probably haven't got a clue about, because it can't be everywhere. So that's why it is so important. I mean, yeah, to some people, they'll see value in it, but to the most, actually, it doesn't present any value at all, because the reason why those things are so cheap is they're being produced in a sweatshop and they're in terrible conditions and so on and so forth, which used to be the case in China. But now that they've come up, certainly over the last 30 years or so, kind of more in line with the way that we think, in terms of, oh, we could come out with a great product and we have to protect it. TikTok, case in point. You know, we don't want the Western, because it used to be East versus West. Perhaps it still is. Don't know, don't care. Politics, politics. But on a serious note, when you've got the possibility of really going somewhere, and then you do, and if you don't do anything about it, it's verging on commercial suicide.
It is. So how far back do you think we can go with markings that would signify some kind of ownership? How far back in time do you think we can go?
Well, if you'd have asked me this question 4 months ago, maybe a bit longer than that, 6 months ago, I would have said maybe 100 or so years. But it's a lot further than that. I might be stretching it. Is it 700 years, something like that?
Well, according to this site that I found, they consider the ancient Europe, the earliest forms of marking suggest ownership include paintings of bison on the walls of the
Ah,
Lascaux cave in southern France. That was 5,000
years
BC.
ago. Yeah. Wow.
And then 600 years BC in ancient Egypt, unique signs or images were incorporated by craftspeople into their work to show where a particular product originated from and who made it. I mean, this is so fascinating. And then 221 BC, so that was 600 BC with ancient Egypt, and then you have ancient China in 221 BC. A seal containing Chinese characters was used in East Asia to prove identity on documents, contracts, art, or similar items where authorship was considered to be important. I find this really, really fascinating. And then in the 1200s, in medieval Europe, merchants' marks were personal marks that developed at the beginning of the 13th century until the end of the 16th. And they were widely used by traders and merchants throughout Europe. And these merchant marks are arguably early trademarks. They displayed the names of the traders and offered a certain level of guarantee that the goods were of the quality that they portrayed. And this was particularly used by bell producers and on paper as in watermarks. I find this really, really fascinating. And then in 1266, in England, the Parliament passed its first legislation concerning trademarks. The baker's marking law required every baker to put a unique mark on bread. I mean, who knew, right?
I had a feeling about that. I remember hearing that in a lesson at school in history years and years ago. But me and dates are not very good. I get a bit fussy when it comes to that. But it's really interesting. So would the event in 1266 be the first time globally where it was legally, dare I say it, stamped?
I'm not entirely sure, because you have those medieval marks in the 1200s in medieval Europe. So, yeah. But it could be that it's a legislation, because this is actually the baker's marking law that required the bakers to put a unique mark on the breads. I just find that so interesting. Who knew? I mean, of course, we know that there are food marks out there. I mean, we were speaking about McDonald's just before coming on air, and there are so many different ones. I just find this so fascinating. And then in 1363, here in England as well, silversmiths were required to mark their wares.
Yeah.
And then we go up to the 1400s, and printers' marks were added to books to identify the printer.
Yeah.
And then we come up to the 1500s. In Europe, emblems decorated palaces, noblemen's castles, inns, and taverns, and were widely used in trade. So fascinating. And then
it is, and you were talking earlier about the cave paintings and everything. So I was fortunate enough to visit my father when he lived in Zimbabwe many years back, and he took me to, on their banknotes, they used, I don't know about now, it's been a long time, but they used to have these rocks that were placed on top of each other. They looked like they were balancing. And I said to my dad, "Where's that?" And he said, "I'll take you there tomorrow. Well, just you and I will go." And we went. I remember it like yesterday, blisteringly hot. They had a drought for something like almost 2 years. In fact, I think it was 2 years. we stumbled across these dead cattle and lions that had just dehydrated. There was nothing of them other than a bit of bone and such like. And then we saw these pictures that the local tribesmen had drawn. So they were marking their territory, which is Dad was explaining to me. And I thought, this is incredible. He said, yeah, but we've got this at home. You go to southern France, and he listed the place that you mentioned, and come out with a load of other bits and bobs. And I kind of put that to one side and moving things forward. And since we've met and we've talked about the traditional way of doing things and how the modern way will likely take over in terms of that's the next stage that we evolve to, because we do. When you talked about the stamp, that's basically an NFT, a very, very, very early version of an NFT in its crudest form possible. The idea, it's down, the fact that it's now digital and you've just got the code, it's the asset behind that's being protected. And that's hopefully where the industry will probably go. I think it will. But I just think it's the powers that be that run it and make those decisions need to come up with that pretty quickly. Because if they don't, they'll be struggling to keep up because technology, as you know, moves so quickly. But for centuries, it was done in a particular way. And as we've got more sophisticated as a race, we've managed to go, that sort of metallic shiny thing called silver, we need to identify that as ours. Let's put a stamp on it. Let's put a stamp of authority, our belongings. We've done it with cattle, haven't we? You know, where they used to burn the backsides of the cows and such like, which I've never liked.
The horses, they were branding horses as well, you know, and they've just decided that that's a cruel way of doing it.
Exactly. And I know we've got things like microchips and stuff like that, but my jury's out on that, to be honest with you. I just think that, look, if you've got several thousand pieces of whatever it is that you're raising, let's say sheep or cattle, you as the owner are really responsible for keeping them in that order and wherever, and making sure that they're maintained, looked after, and in the right place, and all the rest of it. We've gone too far, way past how things used to be now to brand them. It's just not right. But I kind of get it because it's their property. You know, it's something they own. It's how they make their living. And I'm not being some sort of vegan or anything like that coming out for the sort of the earth to preach. I'm sort of two sides on this fence with that, but I get why. There's probably better ways of doing it, and I doubt if we found it yet. Maybe we will in time, you know. But the way that the pattern has evolved from very, dare I say, a crude way of doing it, like painting something on a wall to say that's mine, to where we are now. I mean, if you, unless you're painting your house, if you're doing painting, it's deemed as bloody graffiti, isn't it? So we have evolved so quickly in a relatively short space of time. Because remember, thousands of years is maybe a pinch of salt in terms of the universe.
Exactly.
We always slip into that conversation, don't we? The universe, time,
we do.
how valuable it is, you know. But it's a fascinating subject, and I can't wait to see this article that you speak of, because it's highly educational as well. You should put that out on LinkedIn.
And then in 1618 in England, the first legal case to mention the use of a trademark as a badge of origin for cloth, though the case itself concerned the sale of counterfeit jewels. Southern versus Howe, 1617, Pubham's Reports 143. Don't know if you've heard of those. And then in 1751, in France, furniture makers in Paris were required to sign their work with a mark. It's so interesting. And then in 1791, United States, the Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson, on the petition of Samuel Breck, manufacturer of sailcloth at Boston, Massachusetts, recommended to Congress that it enabled the registration of trademarks. The proposal was not implemented at that time, though. And then in 1857, in France, the first comprehensive trademark system was established by the law on marks of manufacture and trade. And the French name is Loi du 23 juin 1857 sur les marques de fabrique et de commerce. So
that's easy for you to say.
Huh?
That's easy for you to say.
Yes, because I speak the language. So, and in 1870 in America, first U.S. Federal Trademark Act passed. Avril Paints received the first trademark registered under the act. It's so interesting. Do you know, by the way, which trademark was the first one that was registered here in the UK?
Oh, I did, but I can't remember.
It's Bass Pale Ale. You know, the red triangle?
Is it?
Yeah.
I never knew that. I thought it was what did I think? I didn't think it was that one. I thought it was another. It was Bass. Was it really? Okay.
It was Bass. Yeah.
Wow.
And then in 1874 in Germany, the trademark protection law, I'm not going to try to speak German because I don't speak German, but there's a name for that as well, enacted and coming into force on May 1st, 1875. And that's considered to be the first German trademark law. Unfortunately, they don't mention Denmark on here. We're too small to mention, unfortunately. Well, Denmark is. I'm not. And then in 1875, in Great Britain, Parliament enacted the Trademarks Registration Act, creating a national register of trademarks. And then we come down to Bass Pale Ale. But the interesting thing is, a lot of people write trademark in one word. It isn't in English, British English. It is trademark. The way I've done it on the ticker banner that you see below here. It is 2 words. That's how we do it here in England. And in 1876, Great Britain, the Trademarks Registration Office opened in London, and the first mark in the UK was that of the beer company Bass and Company, applied on January 1st, 1876. I heard that, I don't know if this is true. If somebody knows this story better than me, please feel free to correct me. But I heard that a clerk was sent overnight to be the first in line on the day of the opening of the trademark office, and that's how it became the first. I have it here.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's still valid.
Is the office still in the same location, Celeste?
In the same what?
Is the trademark office in London where that act was? Is it still there?
I don't know. I haven't looked into that.
That'd be interesting to find out, because my next question was going to be: have you been there? You know, have you actually been? Can you go and have a look, or is it just?
I haven't been. I don't know. I haven't been, but I think because when I write to the office, it is situated in Wales, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I'm not 200% certain, but I think that's where it is. I don't think it's in London anymore. They've done that in Denmark as well. They push things out of the city. I mean, the trademark registration office or the intellectual property office in Denmark is not situated in Copenhagen. It's situated in a different town outside of Copenhagen.
Maybe it's something to do with not being I can't think of the word, but kind of being a little bit out of the public eye, a little bit away from the rush and the bustle, or it could purely be down to cost. You know, a lot of companies move from London. I'm not saying they all do. They'll move from London because there's a reason why. I mean, the banking sector was in bank. Parts of it still is, but most of it's shipped over to Canary Wharf. Yes, still in London, but it's a slightly cheaper end. You know, their costs would have been reduced. But then when you look at the giant buildings at you and think, how does that work out? But anyway, it's just it's the way it is. I mean, the Royal Mint, where our coins and all that are produced, that's down in Wales somewhere. I've been there. It's fascinating how when things started somewhere, and as they outgrow even a city as big as London, they have to relocate. And it sort of makes sense too, I suppose, because I suppose if everybody knew where it was, they'd be bothered by people from some side. I don't know what they're thinking is, but it's interesting that they're not in London anymore. If that's still the case.
I think that in Denmark it's to do with. I mean, Denmark is such a small country, right? But they're trying to move things out of the center. You know, Zealand is considered the center of Denmark, even though it's not geographically the center of Denmark. It's the sort of trade center is in and around Copenhagen, but when you move things out, it also helps with everybody not moving to Zealand, because Zealand can only contain so many people. You know, it's not a very big place. It's a small island actually. So the fact that they're moving things out means that people won't be as desperate to move to Copenhagen.
So with trademark offices, does every single country have one?
Yeah.
So there's one in every country across the globe. That's fascinating. Even on those Caribbean islands, or have they got like a central hub that they all go to?
I don't know with the Caribbean island if they have a central one, but I know that they have solicitors out there that are dealing with it.
Right.
Because I ran into one in the street completely serendipitously. Because I don't believe in coincidence, you know, but it was just really interesting. I can't remember how we got to talk, but we were both IP specialists, so that was really interesting.
I suppose that makes sense because, you know, with your statement about all the countries globally having them, because if you just look at the UK alone, and even if you just look at, let's say it was only applicable to SMEs, the reason why I'm going there will be apparent in a minute. If it was just small, medium enterprises that it would be desirable to do so, etc., etc. I know it's not. I know that there's about 6.5 million of those in the United Kingdom as we speak right now. So yes, some will be dormant, some will not be, and so on and so forth, and some will be too small or won't have the opportunity yet. But assuming they all did, you'd need a lot of bodies and people around to do that, wouldn't you? You know, so this is just Britain we're talking about. Can you imagine what it's like in the United States? You know, China, India, where there's billions of people, quite literally, just those two countries alone. I think they stack up for about a third of the global population. You know, they would have offices in every region, I'd guess, and many people sort of supplying that. But that was the other.
I don't know if they have in every region, because what tends to happen is that there is like one centralized office that handles all the registration.
Right.
Obviously I do not know if that's the case in India, because I've never been there. And I haven't looked into it, to be completely honest. But that's what tends to happen. Like even with Europe, you have the different member states of the EU, and they have their own intellectual property offices, and then you have the central one for Europe, where you get, when you apply for a European trademark, you get 27 in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is if the trademark falls in one of the member states, it falls in all 27 in one fell swoop, unless there are national registrations.
Yeah.
So that's really, really interesting. Shall we continue a little bit with the? So in 1881 in America. So in 1870, the federal law on registration of trademarks, having been held in 1879 to be unconstitutional, was repealed and replaced with a new act. Very interesting. And then in 1883, the Paris Convention for Protection of Industrial Property was agreed upon. And an international convention relating to trademarks and other industrial property rights under the national legislation of its 11 member countries, as at 2017, the convention had 177 member countries. That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then in Japan in 1884, the first trademark law was established. And this only goes to 1893. And in 1893, Coca-Cola registered their trademark. Did you know that?
Yes, I did know that. I did know that.
And since then, the mark has been revised and modified several times, but this is what it looked like back then.
Yeah. I remember seeing that image like yesterday. We had to do a course on that when I worked for a former employer, but very, very interesting. Very interesting.
The pause that refreshes.
Yeah.
So interesting.
The jury's split on that, whether you like the stuff or not. But I think it's fascinating when the concept was so many thousands of years ago, and it's taken, in space terms, not long, but in our lifetime, centuries to bring it right up to speed, isn't it? And there's probably still further work to do when you look at the new way that people are thinking and working with all stuff digital going on and what have you. But even if you put that to one side, if you still look at the way that you have done things prior to meeting me, for sake of argument, and you think, the importance of having it and that constant education to companies about how important it is. I mean, you tell me every week about the Caramillan story, and I'm like, how not? Why not? Why? How did that slip through? It's just, it staggers me why people don't sit down and go, we've got something really valuable here that we need to protect, because they wouldn't buy a mansion and leave the bloody doors open so anyone could walk in and out. They'd protect it. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And I think some people's thinking is, look, it's not something shiny, bright. I can pick it up and look at it. It's a document. But they get a document when they pass their driving test. They get one when they get married. They get one when they travel. They get one when they want to divorce. They get another one when they want to buy a home. It goes on and on and on. And for some reason, unless you're sophisticated, the business thing seems to kind of go away. Put insurance in place. That'll keep me all right for now. No, it won't. There's certain losses that they won't cover, and this is why your work is so important. But
also I can't remember the exact case with Caramillan, but I remember a similar case from Denmark, and in that case the company went bust. So the fact that the person's name had been signed over to the company, and there wasn't any advice whether or not to buy the trademark back or the label, because it was a clothes label. And if you don't know anybody who can give you advice on the matter, you might think, because in Denmark up until then, it had been possible for anybody to use their surname as their trade name. But that case altered that completely. You are not able to do that anymore. You have to, and that was to do with a third party buying the labels. So that meant that when the person was continuing to sell their wares on social media, they were infringing upon the third party's intellectual property. And that's how it can end up in the wrong hands, so to speak. That's, even though you might have a registered trademark, but if your business goes bust, and if you are not aware of the devastating impact it can have, well, I mean, and yes, 20,000 Danish kroner may not sound like a lot of money, but if your business has just gone bust, where are you going to find 20,000 Danish kroner?
Whether it's Danish kroner or 20,000 grains of sand, the values are relevant, but it's the inconvenience and the reputational and so on that is irreparable. You can replace money. Money comes, money goes. You can Lose a lot, you can win a lot. You know, bookmakers, case in point. But with business, people go under, they go bust, they resurface, they have something else, they'll reinvent themselves. We're resilient as a race. But if you've gone under sort of like a tarnished reputation, if you've lost that, that's almost impossible to regain. That's the difficult bit. So, you know, why not take steps early days, as soon as you can, as soon as it's viable, as soon as Celeste says it's possible to do it, quite simply. Because if you think, I'd love to do it, but I can't afford it, go and find it. There are means and ways of doing that. There will be. But think about Apple as a company. Can you imagine what they'd be worth, or even if they'd still be around, if they didn't take out the necessary protections?
And if they weren't fierce about the protection, because that's something that people also need to understand. You know, you can't just leave your trademark on its own. And Bass wouldn't be a trademark still valid today if they weren't fierce about the protection. You know,
well, it's the way certainly in the beer industry, because they're all trademarks. I don't know any that aren't. You may do, but even microbrewers, when they're coming up to a certain status when they need to do it, they're going ahead and doing it. You know, is it Brewdog, one of the biggest growing ones in the world at the moment? You know, they're protected. It's just common bloody sense. It really is. It's really interesting because it aligns with work I used to do when I worked in insurance. The disciplines are different, but the protection's similar. But what a trademark creates is another asset that gives the company and the business value.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. Right? So if you get to a position where you can get a trademark on your business, my God, that's going to be worth a lot of money when you sell it, or when you.
It is. It's invaluable. Because think about how Apple has just built and built and built and built and built their business up. The same with Nike, just do it. I mean, that sentence, whenever anybody hears it, they know that's what Nike is all about. And Nike, by the way, was the Greek goddess of success.
Yeah.
So
their story is interesting. You know, when you look at the predominantly American sports, because obviously that's where they're based. You know, Tiger Woods was the face of Nike. Now is it LeBron James, the basketball player, was I'm not really up on that.
Wasn't it also that guy, what was his name? Magic Johnson?
Magic Johnson, yeah. They've all been there and they've all looked at the value, but the bits behind the scenes that they're not particularly interested in is what's actually maintaining it. So if they drop that and all of a sudden someone come out with a tick and copied them and such like, they'd be screwed. You know, it's just so important to have your idea, once it's in action and once it's viable, protected. Because if you don't, you're up the swan, up the river without a paddle, sort of thing. You really are.
And you have a little bit of an issue because Adidas uses 3 stripes, and I can't remember the name of the company, but there's a company that uses 4 stripes.
Yeah.
And it's more difficult for them to uphold it, as far as I understand, and they're having a hard time fighting off those ones with the 4 stripes, or the company with the 4 stripes, you know. And so you have to find something that is, because you could say that the stripes, they're just ornamental, but the swoosh of the Nike is different.
Yeah.
And the apple that's been taken a bite out of is different.
Yeah.
So it's really about finding something that will work. And yeah, but it's really interesting, and I find the history of it so interesting as well, because if you go back all the way to the cave paintings, my goodness, you know, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So
That's-
I learned something too, and I love learning new stuff, you know, and I love history. I find history fascinating.
well, it's where we, you know, there's the old phrase, isn't there? In order to move forward, you have to look back. And that is
Yeah.
certainly the case, especially when you're starting out in business. You know, you think, right, got this idea. Let's look at someone who's done reasonably well or really well out of a similar idea. And all right, you don't copy the model as such. You adapt it to your own. So you take the good bits that you like out of that, add your own personality and ideas and so forth. And the idea is off you go, up and running and so forth. So we're used to looking and doing research on everything that we write, everything. And how we do that can vary. There's lots of tools out there to help us now. But you know, if it's very difficult for someone to, you said something this morning on a voice message you left me about future thinking and everything else. Yeah, I'm very much like that. I will come up with stuff that 2 years later, and I sent you the video, someone else who's much more versed in what I do than what I do is saying exactly the same thing that I was saying 2.5, 3 years ago. Not because I'm not trying to be smart or clever. I just think about things and think, right, there's got to be better ways of doing things that will make our life easier, because the ideal scenario is, and this would be my perfect world, go to work for a few hours a week, spend the rest of my life during that week with people I enjoy spending it with. Because it certainly isn't colleagues. No one really enjoys that over and above what they've got at home. All right, that might not be right in all cases, but generally speaking, if you think like that, you need your head looked at. So if I can make my co-workers more productive and help them with their lifestyle, and if I have to protect that in order for that to continue, i.e. to get trademark and such like, well, yeah, it's a sensible thing to do. We don't set out when we wake up to go, right, I'm going to do 100 hours this week. No one does that. Anyone that says that, I don't believe. You know, they don't really want to do that. There's some very successful people that I've followed and I watch on things, places like Twitter and Reddit and all those sort of things, where they do the opposite. They might reduce it to 25, 30. The rest of the time, they'll be reading a book, spending a couple of hours with their wife, having dinner with them in the middle of the day, and just turning their phone off. Great. We'd all really love to do that because we're tied to technology, we're tied to time, we're tied to this, we're tied to that. But if we can wrap it up where we can be far more productive, have more time to ourselves, and even if we just earn the same money, isn't that a better place? I personally think so. But you'll have other people that, you know, they call themselves workaholics, complete load of nonsense. Most workaholics that I've worked with have got a terribly sad lifestyle at home, and it's their escape, and most of them are men. So,
and that's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, by the way?
Well, I'm a bloke, and I've been through rough and short. I've had I had a very easy divorce with my now ex-wife. It was as simple as anything. We don't talk to each other now because we're miles apart. You know, she's remarried. I'm with someone else, but we had a tough time because our kids were younger at the time, and we had to sort of bite the bullet, go out, earn money, put food on the table, and that was becoming harder and harder. We just grew apart, and off we went. But I was spending a lot of time at work. I had quite a high-end job at the time, and I didn't need to. I could have delegated most of what I did, but I chose to sort of work longer because I didn't want to go home and deal with the shit, because I was dealing with shit at work. So the shit follows you everywhere. It's just, where'd you leave it? It's interesting. Yeah. You know, what has this got to do with protection? Well, that's about protecting yourself. You know, phrase, charity starts at home. Protect yourself. Look after yourself first. Then everything else will start to fall into place. So divide your time equally. And then when you need to, when you're younger, when you're healthier, when you've got the energy, chuck it in your work if that's what you've got to do. But look at the exit strategy at the end. Get it set up, get it protected, maintain the protection. So don't just protect it and walk away. Make sure that you've got the latest thing. If you haven't got time and you've got the resources, get someone to do it. Get someone to look after all your assets. But get an asset manager. Get one. They don't have to be experts, but they can use mediums like LinkedIn, good old Google, and things like that, where they can just type, "Where can I find a," and hit. YouTube, they'll find them on there. They'll find them on TikTok as well, believe it or not. There is so much we've got to hand now where we can get hold of experts, and part of the process is finding out how much they know, what's their background, can they give us a social proof of what they've done, who have you worked with, why haven't you worked with others, how does it work in principle. I don't need to know everything, but give me a summary. And they find people like Celeste who can do that, and that's important for any business in the world. Even language now isn't so much of a barrier, and I can see very, very quickly, and I mean in the sort of space of 10 years, where we'll be able to do this. I'm not a multilingualist like Celeste is, but I'll be able to copy a load of French, stick it into a thing, and just say translate it into English without even knowing what the language is originally, and it will do that. That's coming, right? So that will make us better communicators in some respects. Yes, it takes away a lot of the "you really should learn." I'm the wrong side of 55. I haven't got that time anymore. I can't sit down and do that. I haven't got time or the inclination. And there's millions of me's, So this is where we go. But the originator of said product would come to someone like you and go, "Got this, it's a great idea, I'm making millions, protect me." Simple as that. And what I like, and I've asked you this question several times, and you've come back consistently with the same thing. Your track record's 100%, no failures, which is I've never heard of, and I love. But you just know when you can put one through or when you can't.
Yeah.
And the one that's you can't, and I haven't really asked you to sort of hone in on that, but maybe it's a case of, it's because it's just not possible the way things are now, and legal status can change. You made that example about the names in Denmark. There's probably nothing stopping someone to reverse that and turn it back. I don't know whether it's a good thing or not, but I'm just saying nothing seems to be forever. There seems to be change, adoption, different ways of thinking, new generation come up with ideas. Don't know.
But there is this one, and I think this one rule that I don't think will ever change, and that is not everything can and not everything should be registered as a trademark. Because if that was the case, as I've said before, you and I wouldn't be able to have a normal conversation, and that is a pain in the backside, and we do not want that pain. So we still want to be able to talk normally and talk to each other without having to say registered trademark the whole time. If we did this the right way, we should say Apple registered trademark, and we should say Grand IPR registered trademark. We don't. But that is the way. So and that's how I know when things can't be registered. It's because they do not live up to the strict criteria.
Tell me more about that. You said last week it's like certain names and certain things that we use in everyday language. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. There's an organisation called Ask, Ask, and there used to be Ask Jeeves, didn't there? I think that's where it came from. There might even be a clothing manufacturer. I've got the word Ask going on in my head. If somebody come up with the concept of, and this again might already be in place, I want to call my business A-N-D, and they had a reason why. How would you deal with that? Could you give us an idea of what you look for without giving too much away, and whether that would be?
I would say that "and" is generic.
Yeah.
It's a word that is used so much in our day-to-day language. If it was A.N.D. that might be different, but still it's a question of looking at what is what is it that they're actually wanting to register, and what is it they want to register it for, and why?
Yeah.
Okay. And because as I say, we can't register everything, and we don't want to. There are people who are wanting to register their children's names, and this is mainly celebrities. And to some extent, I understand their thinking, and to some extent, it seems silly to me. Because why would you want your child's name to be a trademark?
Maybe again, that could be an education thing in terms of they just assume that's the way stuff's done. And I know these celebrities have got, millions of dollars to chuck at things and so forth, but sometimes perhaps they're not best advised. And this can even be from a legal standpoint, can't it? We don't.
I know, for instance, that in America they have a gradation of 5 steps of what can be, of registrability, which to me is just a waste of time.
Yeah.
Either something's registrable or it's not. Why grade it? Why make it even more difficult than it already is?
Yeah.
That is such a waste of time and energy for people. Make it simple to understand. Make it something consistent. Don't grade it like that, because it confuses the heck out of people.
Yeah.
Be consistent. Be so sharp and to the point every single time that there is no confusion. Honestly.
And that's the key for virtually everything, isn't it? Consistent. We all strive for it. We were talking about when bread first come on the scene and they stamp their seal of approval or their seal of ownership on it and such like. I remember Hovis, the company Hovis, used to have pan bread. I should know. I loaded thousands of these bloody things up when I was in the supermarket sector, and it would have its brand on the side. I'm not sure if it still does. I've not looked at it, to be fair.
Hovis still has the brand on their bread in the soup. I've seen it in Tesco. That's why.
Actually,
that's how I know.
On the bread still. Okay, so there's an example where they still do things the way that they've always done, and that's I quite like that. I think that's really, really good.
And with regards to trademarks, it's important because if you came to me and you got me to register a trademark, and then you suddenly completely disregarded it and started doing something completely different, and I would say, Dave, what are you doing? I can't hold this for you anymore if you don't do it. If you don't use it the way that I registered it for you, I can't help you. You're making my life more difficult when it comes to me protecting you. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
What are you thinking here?
It's also with these really, these other big companies like the digger manufacturer JCB. We were talking a few weeks ago about hoovering the house. Well, actually, it's vacuuming, but no one says that, or very few.
But Hoover is not going to appreciate that because it's a misuse of their trademark.
Exactly. When you go and you've got some earth to clear out, you go, I need to get hold of a JCB. What you actually mean is a digger, because you might get a Caterpillar version or a Komatsu or whatever. There's loads of brands out there, and this is something where most people, I would say probably over 99%, will just go, yeah, but it's just general. That's a generalization. We've always called it that. We've always called it.
But that's how you kill a trademark.
Yeah.
That's how you kill it.
Yeah.
And the trademark owner will not appreciate that.
Yeah.
They will. Hate is a really strong word, but they will probably hate you for it. Yeah. If I'm completely honest, because they have taken time and they've spent energy and they've spent hours and hours and hours in achieving what they've achieved, and then along come you and a load of other people and completely disregard it, and they do not appreciate, they do not like it, they do not appreciate it. So be careful and be nice and be respectful, most of all, and be consistent as well.
Yeah. I remember in 1982 or 3, I was working for McDonald's for the first time, and they had changed from Coca-Cola to making their own Coke. And we had to say every time a customer came in, yeah, can I have a Coke with that? And we used to have to say the following: it's McDonald's Cola, is that okay? So we'd ask them a question. And most of the time, people go, yeah. They didn't understand the why. I must admit, I didn't. I was 17 years old, and I didn't either. But of course, I was told why. And they said, if we use the term Coca-Cola, you will notice it's no longer on our cups. I mean, it's back now. They're back using them now, but then they weren't. I was like, oh, never really noticed that. He said, yeah, we had to take it all off. We have to tell people this, etc., because if we don't, and one of their people could have to walk in, because nobody knows who anyone is, do they? It could cause us legal issues. And I thought, that makes sense. I get it. You know, even at 17, when I was really green and wet behind the ears and everything else, but I understood it. Geez, that was 40 years ago. Crikey. But it's education. It's all about educating people that are lacking in the knowledge. There's nothing wrong with that. We all lack knowledge in something. But in an area as important as what you do, an education route is a good idea to get on board, learn about the features, the benefits, because that's what you do with every single product.
Simple way to learn about it is to buy my book.
Yeah. And
another simple way is to keep following my LinkedIn Lives and my YouTube channel, because that's where I share all this information for free, you know. Yeah. And this is highly, I keep saying to people, and it's not for fun that I say it, these are platinum nuggets because there's so much value in here.
Yeah. The other thing which I sort of like doing is looking at educational sources outside of what's already there. You know, perhaps coursework, some kind of like a masterclass, if you like, and that would be something cool to put together, wouldn't it, to help others understand. But you know, I think the way the world is going, and at the acceleration, you know, it doesn't take long to set a business up and do it in 10 minutes. You know, you've got a name, you've got an idea, bang, off you go. You get people that you know, trust, like, work with, and then you get successful, and then you go, oh, I've got a nice problem here. I need to go somewhere and get rid of this problem. Oh, Celeste's my girl. She can do it. She knows about all this stuff. Done. That's how I look at things really simply, and I'm surprised that there's not a lot of people that think like I do. And there is, you know, it's not rocket science. It's just common sense.
It is common sense.
And I think
the thing also to know and understand is that when you register your business with Companies House, they do not care what business name you've got. They do not care if your business name is confusingly similar to somebody else's. It's when you go to want to register it that you may and will hit a brick wall. Because if you haven't done due diligence and if you haven't paid attention, your dream may be shattered, particularly if your concept hinges on that particular thing. And I keep referring back to this because this is a true thing. It happened to me while I was registering a trademark for a client of mine. There was somebody else that wanted to use part of their trademark for their business, and they hadn't done due diligence. And what happened? Dream completely shattered because I was able to provide proof of use, proof that I was in the process of registering the trademark. So when they went away and got legal advice elsewhere, they were told that they were in the wrong, and their business project couldn't even take off. Yeah. It couldn't, because it hinged on that particular little word, and they hadn't done due diligence, and due diligence is so important in this matter, you know. So pay attention, sit up and be intelligent about it. And if you don't know anything, reach out. I'm here to help. I'm here to support. That's part of my service.
I echo all that you said. Okay, I'm just sort of conscious of the time because we're coming up to the hour mark. Have we got any questions that need answering, or are we ready to wrap it down?
I did write any questions for us here a moment ago. Oh well, a while ago, but nothing's come through. So it must mean that we are being so informative. They don't need to pop any questions in for us.
Well, that'd be nice. Okay.
The interesting thing, though, is that when we're doing the lives, we can go over 1 hour. It's just when we do a recording that it can't go past the hour. It's really, really interesting.
I'm conscious of my time. I've got quite a bit coming up, so I just wanted to see what was what. All righty. Well, on that note, then, should we give it a wrap and catch up again next week? Do you know what the subject is next week, or is that the one we've already done?
The one next week is the one we recorded on Friday, and I finally got it edited down to just below an hour. It was really, really hard work. But let's end the broadcast here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on again.
Everybody. See you next week. It's a recording. Don't forget.